Hello, and welcome back to week 21 of the No BS Home Buyers live series, where we are breaking down the home buying process into simple and easy steps so that way you can go from thinking about buying to actually owning a home. So, thank you for joining with me today. And today we are going to be covering earnest deposits and escrow. And don't worry if you have no idea what that means, I will explain it. But when we're in that situation of buying, one of the fastest panic buttons that starts is like when you go under contract and you now have to give this earnest deposit, which is you are giving money and you're putting your money where your mouth is. So let's dive into this a little bit so that way you truly understand what an earnest deposit is and where it's going and who's helping manage that. So that way you're not blindsided when you get there in your transaction. So let's just talk about these words a little bit. And I understand that they're kind of strange words. And if you haven't ever ran into them, you're just like, what the heck does that even mean? And it can be really intimidating at first, and that's okay. But really, it's actually not that scary. We're going to walk through what it means so that way you're confident, because confusion will create anxiety, but clarity will create confidence. And we want you to be confident when you are buying your home. So, let's just start with what is earnest money. Earnest money is just a good faith deposit. So it's saying, hey, I am putting my money where my mouth is. I am serious. I want to buy this house. My contract is legit. Here's some money to show you how serious I am. And this money goes towards the purchase price. So it's not just extra money. That may be the case in some states. There are additional things in certain states that are kind of weird. But in most cases, the earnest deposit is just money that will go towards the purchase. So if you're buying a $100,000 house and you're giving $1,000 earnest, that just means you have to figure out the remaining $99,000 for closing, whether that's through a loan or through cash, however you want to do it. But that $1,000 will go towards your purchase price. But the reason we do this is it just shows the seller that you're serious. It's just a way to put your name in the game and actually, put some skin in the game, as they say. So is the earnest money extra money? That's always the question I get. No, it goes towards your purchase price, and or your closing costs and down payments later too. So the next question I get is, so how much earnest money do I need to bring to the table? And this will typically vary by the market or the price point. Generally, we'll say 1% of the purchase price around here, or 1 to 2%. If some certain areas, like locally here, if you see $1,000 flat, that's pretty common. Up until about $500,000, people will just say, oh, I'm going to give you $1,000 earnest. If I'm representing a seller and we're on that 500,000 mark, I want it to be higher than that. I would be asking or countering back for the 1%. And really, this number is more of a feel-good number. So the reason I say it's more of a feel-good number is because if you back out during inspections or you can't get bank financing, you can get it back so long as you haven't written it off as non-refundable. So it feels good the higher the number is. It makes the sellers feel like you're more serious. But as long as you have your inspection contingency and are working through the timelines properly, in the event you had to get out of the contract for legitimate reasons, you would get that back. If you just left at the end and decided not to buy the house, they're going to come after you for that, but they're also going to sue you to close. So in most cases, you're going to get that back. But anyway, so we are back to how much. It typically is about 1% to 2% of the purchase price. So if you're buying $100,000, $1,000. If you're buying $200,000, $2,000, and that is due when you have a signed contract. So you put in an offer and the seller declines your offer, you do not have to put in the earnest money. But if you put in an offer and the seller accepts your offer, that earnest money will be due in whatever the contract states. Pretty typical around here is 3 business days or 72 hours or 5 business days. It's whatever you decide when you put it in the purchase agreement. And when do you pay it? like I said, and typically about 3 business days is normal. Work with your realtor so that way you know, because if you do not get that money in by the time that it says on the contract, that is an out for the seller. There's a way for the seller to be like, well, you didn't follow the contract, so I'm out of this, and they could back out of the contract. So you want to make sure that whatever it says on your purchase agreement, you are following that to a T. Typically, it'll be 3 business days at 5:00 p.m. So you just want to make sure that you have a receipt that it has been turned in. And how can you pay that? There's a couple of different ways. You can wire transfer money to the title company. You can do like a certified check and deliver that to the title company. But again, that timeline matters a lot. A lot of title companies now also have an online payment option. And so as soon as you submit that, they'll have a receipt of when you submitted that. So that is another option. But if you are handing off a check in person, very rarely does it go to the seller. One, always make sure it goes to the title company, whether you're handing that to your agent or to the title company directly. You should be able to receive some sort of receipt that has the time and date, so that way there is a paper trail to make sure you are complying with your purchase agreement. So I've also mentioned the word escrow, and you might be wondering, okay, well, what is escrow? Escrow it's essentially a third party, a neutral third party that is holding things down while everyone does their part of their side of the transaction. So oftentimes it is a title company. It can also be an attorney, or it can potentially be a brokerage, a real estate brokerage that's managing escrow. But essentially it's supposed to be a middleman, making sure that everything is happening correctly before the monies actually change hands. So what escrow handles, and you can also hear people refer to escrow like we are in escrow, which is essentially we are under contract. We are working through the contract in the process. So they'll say we're in escrow, we're under escrow, or escrow can also interchangeably be used with title, the title company. So when you hear those words, just kind of understand that is the manager of the whole transaction, making sure buyer and seller are working together and getting things done so closing can happen. But what they actually do is they are the people that hold the earnest money. Again, you're typically writing your earnest deposit to the title company or to the attorney that is handling the closing, not to the sellers. And then they will coordinate documents. So the closing documents, a lot of times the lenders will send them their mortgage files for them to go over with you at closing, and the title company and the mortgage lender have to balance at the end and make sure that their numbers all match, so that way when you go to close, everything lines up properly. And the title company will help facilitate the closing, like the actual signing of the documents, filing of the deeds, and different things like that. So title companies or escrow companies are very important in a transaction, and those titles can be used interchangeably. But we want to remember that escrow protects both the buyer and the seller. Again, typically the title company is running a background on the property's history to make sure that nobody claims any kind of ownership over the property. They're making sure that all the numbers line up for the seller. Anything that needs to be paid off liens wise is taken care of in the sale. And then anything that needs to be credited to the buyer or accounted for the buyer is also accounted for. So it can look a little different depending on which state. A lot of them, I think, do use title companies. Some of them will just use attorneys. But there will be someone managing escrow during your transaction. And depending on your state, your agent can help recommend different companies that are beneficial for you to use or that they've had good luck with. So this is where your agent is very important. And sometimes you'll even see a seller request a certain title company or a certain closing entity. And typically that is because they're buying another house and they are already using that title company to buy. So all of the information is at that title company. Or you might see investors who say flipped a house, you request a specific title company. And that is because they already have all of their LLC information, their operating agreement, and all the fun paperwork that You as the buyer don't have to turn in because you're not an entity, you're a buyer. Unless you're buying it in an LLC, then you will also have to turn that in. But a lot of times that's when they're requesting a specific title company. You can absolutely shop around on title companies. I would say most of them are pretty similarly priced. You're typically going to see maybe a little difference in the closing fee, some of the administration fees, but title insurance and things are pretty similar across the board. So if a seller is requesting a certain title company, it's normally out of a convenience factor, not so much a price factor. But yeah, just something to consider. And then let's talk a little bit about timelines and what's happening, because once you're under contract, the clock starts. The searching period, you really haven't started any kind of timeline clocks. You're just doing your search. Once you have a contract in place, things move very quickly, and that is where an agent is super helpful and important for you, because they do this every day. They know the processes, and they are going to help get you from, oh, I like this pretty house, to, oh, I live in this pretty house. So typical timelines are, again, you write your offer. A lot of times that'll take about 24 to 48 hours to really hammer out. Most people are giving a seller at least 24 hours to review the offer. If it's a really competitive situation and you want to know sooner, you may ask for sooner. It's not polite, I would say. It's preferred to give at least 24 hours, but if they have certain criteria that they're looking at, they may ask for longer than that. Just kind of depends on what the seller situation is. And then once you have sent in that offer, the seller has a chance to respond. They can accept your offer, they can counter it, or they can not respond at all. So whatever happens, just wait and see. But typically they try to respond within your requested response time. But then once, let's say they respond, yes, we're going to accept your offer. That is when that counts as day 0. So that is when your timeline starts. And let's say you go under contract on a Sunday and you have 3 business days to get in your earnest deposit. That would mean you have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at 5 p.m. You need to have your earnest deposit delivered to the title company and receipted. So just know that that moves pretty quickly, and you can pay for your earnest deposit a couple of different ways, depending on the amount. Like if it's over $10,000, I would do like a cashier's check. If it's like around 1,000, 2,000, you can do a personal check. You can, take cash to a title company. It just needs to be quick and liquid and available to deliver within that time frame. Let's say 3 days to be safe. So if you are planning to use some like retirement accounts for part of your closing and whatnot, don't plan on the earnest deposit coming out of that. Plan for that to be liquid cash available to you currently. And then after you have your earnest deposit, and once you go under contract, that also will typically start your inspection period. Around here, that's about 14 days. It totally varies. I know in a town not very far from us, Omaha, they're 10 days. So you just really need to rely on your agent on what your inspection period timeline is and all of that going forward. And then after inspections, you have your appraisal and then loan approval and finally closing day. And so the times when you're not going to get your earnest money back is when you are deciding not to close outside of these periods. So outside of the inspection period, outside of the appraisal. Pretty much I always tell my clients, if you show up on the last day to closing and decide, I'm not going to buy this house, and don't sign, 1, you're losing your earnest deposit. And again, 2, you're probably going to get sued. So just don't do that and you don't have to worry about it. But if you're backing out because, you did an inspection and the foundation is falling in and you're like, I'm not buying this house, as long as you have your inspection period in place, you will get your earnest deposit back. You may have to fight the sellers a little bit on it, but ultimately it is not their money. So that is what the title company is for, and that is who you would ask for the money back. And one thing I want to iterate is my buyers always get really excited when they're under contract, but under contract does not mean done. Quite frankly, it is the start of the race. and we have a ways to go to the finish line. So it is very exciting to have something accepted, but it just means that deadlines are starting to pop up and you need to be very on your game and paying attention so that way you can successfully get to the closing table. So let's talk about some of the biggest misunderstandings, and this is kind of where buyers tend to get tripped up, is they think that the earnest money just straight up disappears. I just put it in and now it's done and gone. No, it goes towards your purchase price. And you will see on your closing statement where you put in earnest money. And then another big mistake that we're just seeing come up a lot, which I probably should do its own topic on, is wiring funds and the wire fraud going around. I always tell my clients, if you are deciding to wire funds, whether that's delivering an earnest deposit or bringing your closing amount, please verify the wire before you send it. And by verify, I don't mean verify by calling the phone number that came on the email. I mean Googling whoever you're wiring the money through, typically the title company. Google the title company's name, find the publicly listed phone number, and call that phone number. Because scammers are very creative and they will change the phone number to someone that they know. And when you call and verify the wrong wire information, they'll say, oh yeah, that's correct. And then you'll wire your money to someone that isn't them, and title can't really help you on that. So just be very careful because scammers are getting very creative with their wire fraud changing. I know there's people here in Lincoln, Nebraska that got like frauded out of like $300,000. So or more. And that's not a totally uncommon story that you can find those all over the United States. So just be careful with that. And then lastly, assuming every deal is going to close automatically. Again, the under contract is the start of the race, not the finish line. There is a lot that's going to go on before you get to the finish line, and you may not end up closing on that house. So don't be totally heartbroken if that ends up not being the one. You may find out that the foundation is terrible during inspections, sellers aren't willing to fix it, and they aren't willing to go down on price. Well, you probably shouldn't be buying that house. But each thing is just, each contract and situation is different. So you just kind of have to play it by ear, rely on your realtor, use their resources. But that is kind of the overview of what an earnest deposit is, what escrow means, and if it's overwhelming or unfamiliar, that's okay. That's what your realtor is there to help you with. But hopefully now that you've listened to this, you'll have a little bit better idea of what is going on, and just kind of understanding what these terms are referencing and what they mean. Because buying a home is a process. It is not a surprise test. So just work through it, go through it slowly, ask the questions that you need to, and feel confident now that you have a little bit more understanding of what maybe your questions will be. And if you need help finding a realtor, I would love to help you. I can help matchmake you with anyone in the United States and beyond. But if we're going outside of the United States, give me a little extra time because everywhere else in the world does things a little differently. But next week, we are going to be diving more into contingencies, what they are, what that means, and what to expect in order to help you move forward with more clarity and confidence and keep you prepared for when you are buying your home. So thank you again for joining me. This is the No BS Homebuyer Live series, where I'm breaking down the home buying process into simple, easy steps so you can go from thinking about buying to actually owning a home. And I will see you next week. Thanks. Oh, maybe now.